Discussion, it's the heart of the matter. Serving up opinions on a silver platter. It's a grind. The information getting, bringing your guy so hot you'll be sweating. These two dudes with attitudes will put you in the mood for a plate full of brain food. So don't delay, my daughter, my son. Visit the buffet called Promoter 101.
Welcome to Promoter 101, episode 234, or the fifth of our rebooted era. How's the reboot feeling to you, Luke?
Feeling pretty good, Dan. It's nice to be back here enjoying a summer afternoon as we record this podcast, celebrating our lucky number 5 of the reboot era, Dan. Feels like maybe we should be doing more.
Well, let's at least plan on a number 6.
We'll get through this one first. How about we just finish 5, let these people have it?
I'm pointing to the fucking stadium wall like Babe Ruth style. We're doing 7! We're doing 7!
Well, Dan, let's get into it because we got an episode ahead of us here. We've got Hancher Auditorium's executive director and former NIVA president and current board member, Andre Perry, on the podcast. Excited about that interview.
Strap in, ladies and gentlemen. Promoter 101 starts right now.
Let's face it, work is overrated. Conference room. Tune in to Steiny and Luke and pretend you're productive together.
We have a bunch of past Promoter 101 episodes available for your entertainment at your leisure. You can listen anytime you want to any of the back catalog at promoter101.com.
Feel free to hit us up with your ideas and questions at steiny@promoter101.net.
And of course, we're all over the internet. That's where the real conversation's happening. On X, the show is at Promoter 101. I'm at W. Luke Pierce. Dan's at The Jew. Over on Instagram and Threads, the show is at Steiny Promoter 101. Dan is at Dan Presents, and I'm keeping it real with at W. Luke Pierce.
Luke, do you think X is just a dead vehicle at this point? Has it become the Friendster of social media?
I mean, not if you like Nazis and porn, Dan. It's like a great place to be right now for those things.
Well, as a lifelong Jew, I have a feeling of the Nazis.
How about porn?
I have a feeling of porn, too.
The bastion of free speech that is X, Dan. There's a lot of conversation happening. People really want to know what your opinions are.
Well, luckily they've tuned in, and we're going to just give them a humdinger of those today. Shall we, Luke? Shall we?
Let's do it.
They thought they wanted careers. Turns out they just wanted paychecks. Steiny and Luke in the morning on Promoter 101.
Luke, should we talk about the industry news?
Dan, it's earnings season. All over Wall Street, getting all the reports. Among them, of course, Live Nation. The only publicly traded company in live entertainment reported its earnings this past month. Big picture, they're on fire, of course. We got the data to prove it now. The Q2 results are in. Live Nation posting a record $7 billion in revenue. That's up 16% year over year. Concerts pulling in almost $6 billion. It's highest Q2 haul ever with a nearly 20% jump year over year. And maybe even more telling than this, Dan, they actually promoted fewer shows, especially in North America, but saw global attendance climb from up to 44.1 million fans. It's a 14% increase in the same period year over year. Stadium attendance tripled globally. International shows outside North America surged by more than a third. It's a blueprint. Fewer, bigger, and broader, Dan. And they're not just banking on crazy ticket prices. The average per fan spend dropped from $134.69 down from $151 last year as they ramp up and try to reach volume in some of these emerging markets. So they're expecting, in their guidance here for the rest of the year, almost 70 million fans expected by year end, and 95% of sponsorship revenues committed, way ahead of last year. So top line stuff, Dan, looking great. Bigger global stadium tours, venue expansion, more emerging markets, scalable business that thrives on economies of scale and their digital pre-sale engines. Live Nation trading mass for margin, and it's certainly paying off. I'm sure you are seeing it, right?
A lot of this has to do with the acts being willing to go places they've never gone before. So you're seeing Coldplay and Ed Sheeran lead the way into some of these markets that we've never seen some of these bigger stadium acts roll into. And if the artists are willing to take a chance and go somewhere new, it's going to help open up those markets, especially the bigger artists. So, I mean, we saw Bowie doing some of this in the 80s, and, now you've got, once the first act does it, the rest of them are ready to come following through, right? It's just who's going to be the first one in. And once somebody figures it out how to do it the first time, then there's a formula. And it's the first one's always the hardest, right? It's like the first guy through the wall is always the bloodiest. So hats off to the Ed Sheerans and the Coldplay for willing to go where no one else has gone before, especially at that scale. But there's a big part of the world that we still need to service. And I'm not just talking about Live Nation. I think the industry in general is missing part of the population, and live entertainment should go everywhere. Artists should have that opportunity because there's so much traffic in America. If you can take some of those acts and bring them to places they haven't been yet, it's better for the other acts playing America at that moment to take some of that traffic off the table. And it's better for those markets that aren't getting the entertainment dollar brought to them, that they have the opportunity to see a concert.
No doubt. We've talked about this before on the podcast, but like Live Nation reporting numbers isn't entirely indicative of the health of the larger live entertainment business right now, which I think is something worth checking in on. At the same time, we've got these Live Nation results. We also have some concerning economic indicators starting to flash yellow, maybe even red by some people's standards in the United States. You've got, leading economic indicator indexes dropping almost 3% in the first half of the year. That's more than double its shrink over the prior 6 months. So it's a flash that a downturn could be in the making there. You're seeing slipping retail sales. July retail figures were only up, I think, 0.3% after adjusting for inflation. That's tepid at best. You see those same store retail struggles. Clusters like merch booths or concessions could feel the pinch as well, too. And there's some early signals on unemployment happening right now. The SOM rule, which monitors monthly unemployment, surpassed its 12-month average. It's a strong early recession flag. So as of August 2025, that trigger had been pulled, which means we're not fully in retreat yet, but like we are on our way there in terms of recessionary activity at this point.
And the housing market can't be ignored, that in the first time in ages, it is a buyer's market, not a seller's market in the real estate for home buying, which is obviously another indicator you got to be paying attention to.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, there's all these things flashing yellow at this point here too, but you still got people like Goldman Sachs out there predicting that live music is a recession, proof product. They're calling for more than 7% growth versus like 3% in general consumer spending. What does this mean, really, though? Like, where are they seeing that growth drive? And I think it's into the pockets of stadium and, maybe arena level acts.
It's bullshit to say the industry is recession proof. It's just not, right?
It's just not.
The biggest acts in the world, the Coldplays, the Shakiras, the Ed Sheerans, the Taylor Swifts, absolutely, people are going to go no matter what. They're the biggest acts in the world. Everybody wants to see them. But at the other levels, you're going to feel it. In the arenas, you're going to feel it more than you are in the stadiums. In the clubs, you're going to feel it more. In the ballrooms, you're going to feel it more. In the theaters, you're going to feel it more because those acts are less rare and it's less of a spectacular and people are making choices. And if you choose to go to a show that costs you that much for a ticket, it's going to mean you have to make other choices. So something to think about when you go to a show that has merch that's going to be that expensive and the ticket's going to be that much expensive, and maybe you're traveling, you're going to see Beyonce, you're going to see Oasis, and they're only playing a handful of markets and you got to travel to it. It adds hotel, it adds air, it adds Ubers or rental cars, it adds, if you're flying to a show, you're definitely getting merch, right? That you need something to experience the merch, remember the experience, so you got to have that merch. These things are kicking things up. Metallica's only playing certain stadium markets, right? So you're driving or you're flying. Do you want to see these bands at that level? It means that you're not doing other things because there's only so much money. So yeah, it's going to hurt everybody at every level.
That's like the phenomenon that I think is really interesting to observe here too, and I think it not only touches kind of like smaller acts where fans are trading out maybe two or three small shows a year versus like one giant blowout stadium level production event. You're seeing less activity at the clubs and the theater level, but like soft ticket stuff, right? The economic impact studies on stadium shows for Taylor, Beyonce et al. It extrapolates out like a college football game would, 100 miles in any direction, from hotel yields and occupancy to spends that happen in those places. But to your point, flying to Indianapolis for a Taylor Swift show for three people is flights, hotels, merchandise, expensive tickets. I mean, that's not just concert entertainment budget for a lot of people. That's other types of spending, restaurant, eating out, that sort of stuff is going to be impacted by all this as well too. So to say that it's a recession-proof industry is, like, in my opinion, pretty folly. Like that.
I will say the top tier of the industry does feel recession-proof. The biggest tours, the biggest artists, the hottest bands. Like, weekend tickets seem like they're going to sell no matter what.
Yeah.
I'll give you that.
Yeah, because all you got to do is find 80,000 people with, $1,200 each to basically come to a show, right?
Right, but it's like, Serena Carpenter's not going to have trouble selling tickets anytime soon, right? It's just not an issue. Yeah. Hot shows are hot shows.
I think it's just certainly finding, for artists, promoters, managers, agents, figuring out where to go next. I mean, being intentional with your pricing in 2026 and being intentional as to why you tour. Like, you got to have a reason. You can't just be out there doing shit.
Maybe you do. It depends, right? Like, James Taylor can tour off the hits forever. If you're a level of that iconic heritage level, no problem.
Yeah. But for, people in the kind of middle class, middling state of artists, I feel like you do have to have the reason to be out there and tour.
Sure. And there's other things you're going to have to start worrying about. Vegas is seeing a serious downshift right now. The economy's playing into that. I think Canadians not wanting to come to the U.S. because of tariff backlash is hurting Vegas. Hotel rooms are down, and that's going to hurt those residencies long term. So, like, it will hurt the business. It just will.
It has to. In some way, we're going to see this come back at us, and whether we're in it right now, these indicators are right, or I've been screaming this from the rooftops for a year now, that the other shoe's got to drop at some point. And it feels more than ever, just from larger things, not just home sales and auto sales, but like when you start seeing same store retail sales at Chipotle go down for 2 months straight, like, that's not a good sign. So batten down the hatches.
Is that the indicator that Home Free looks at when they decide where to tour, is how Chipotle sales are going in the market month over month?
No, we don't look at Chipotle per se. I certainly consider those and advise all of our clients, accordingly for what we think is happening. But
not a bad indicator, right? Like, Trader Joe's effect on a market will bring up real estate values across the board when they open a Trader Joe's in a market. Chipotle sales, whether those up or down in a market, should actually show you whether the market's in a solid economy or not.
I mean, I look for the kind of blue collar leading indicators, whether it be Chipotle, McDonald's, any sort of thing to suggest those things. It's not just the giant macro things that are tied to interest rates. It's the things that are tied to consumer spending and employment that really concern me at this point. And we'll see. I mean, there's some fucking chicanery happening right now in the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, as I'm sure most people have read about here. So, like, there's plenty of independent reports that come out that verify economic information for the United States. Some of that is reported by our government. Some of that parts of the government seem to be getting shelled right now. So, paying attention to the private reports and what they're indicating at this point, I think is just like responsible management at this point.
All right. What else we got?
Some brighter news, Dan. I want to talk about a story of purpose, power, and profit. We got the Black Promoters Collective. I don't think we've talked about the BPC on this podcast, but coalition here that's come together and for 2025, on track for its first ever $100 million year. It's a major spike in independent concert promotion.
They're doing an amazing job of packaging acts and putting them together and doing arenas with a lot of the heritage urban acts, but in general, just a lot of the urban acts they're focusing on. And they're doing business in places on a massive arena level that I would not have expected, but the growth there is really solid.
Totally. I mean, you got Brandy and Monica on the Boys Mine Tour. They Jazz in the Gardens down in South Florida, which got more than 35,000 people at it and earned some top 10 festival attendance status for the first half of the year. Definitely some growth there. And I think it's
high grossing shows, selling real tickets, to be taken seriously.
And I think what's cool and great about the Black Promoters Collective is not just the commerce story, right? It's a bit of cultural reclamation. So it's building an ecosystem rooted in Black creativity, telling a financial and artistic success all in one breath together. And so, if you want proof that the industry's, shifting habits, this is certainly one of them. It's like independent, identity-driven promoters are doing numbers on par that, are equaling independently large major players. So is this the future of live music? It's happening right now. This independent movement for the BPC is something that's worth highlighting and celebrating.
I think the deeper dive into that story is probably something we should do in a future podcast. I would love to talk to them.
I know we have a few friends that are across the space here. Maybe we should invite them on the podcast. That'll do it for News of the Week.
Steiny and Luke would like to remind you that a clean desk is a sign of a cluttered desk drawer. Promoter 101.
It wouldn't be Promoter 101 if we didn't honor some Dan tweets of the month. So Dan, you're a little light on socials this month. You had a lot of travel. We'll give you a pass on that. You did some European vacationing, but you had a few little nuggets in here that I want to touch on for this episode of the podcast. And let's start with this one. When people go just too far with a gift from Will Ferrell, you sit on a throne of lies.
Never fails to amaze me what people will lie about. It's so easy to verify things now that we have this technology called the internet, Luke.
It's all over the place, Dan. You don't even need Google anymore. It's just a good prompt into some research lab.
There you have it.
How about this one, Dan? Never be a snob about working nights or weekends. Take the call anytime anyone wants to deliver you business.
Money is green. Take the business anytime somebody wants to give it to you or your competitor will.
Some good advice for late-stage capitalism, Dan.
Greed is good. Greed is good. Little Gordon Gekko for you.
Money never sleeps. That'll do it for Tweets of the Month. Make sure you keep up with Dan so you can get all these gems. He's at the Jew over on X.
Apparently where you find the porn and the Nazis.
Yeah, bit of both.
Wake up with Steiny and Luke. And then you should probably question all your life choices. Yeah. Promoter 101.
We're excited for this month's feature interview because we're being joined by Hancher Auditorium's executive director and former NIVA president and current board member, Andre Perry, joining us on the podcast. He's coming off fresh from the NIVA conference, had all the gems to share with us.
Andre Perry joining us from the heartland of Iowa, coming off NIVA conference, and you just finished your rotation on the board as well as president. So, big moments for you because you guys just had a massive NIVA conference in Milwaukee.
We did. I call it phased retirement. Today when we're doing this interview is my last as the board chair, but I've got one more year on the board. So I figure, that they're going to bring me down slow, have a couple of tasks for me to do, and then I shall be free. We hope forever. But no, it's been a good run. I was just talking to Steven, our executive director, and we can't even remember to 2 years ago because I started as board chair just a little bit after he came on as the executive director. It's just been an insane couple years, and not just for us at NIVA. I think for literally everyone, just trying to keep count of what happened in the time post-pandemic is maybe equally difficult to keeping track of what happened during the pandemic. So we're excited to be here. We're excited just to still be in the game.
Well, you guys are more than in the game. And I think what NIVA has done has changed the game because it gave indies a voice collectively they maybe never had, and at least got everybody rowing in the same direction for the moment. But it seems like there was a lot of speculation that this might just be something that existed during COVID and would it last afterwards. And I think you guys beat expectations and have come out to be stronger now than you guys were in the height of searching the grant money. So well done. It's really impressive.
Yeah. I think it's this network, this community of indies across the states. Maybe we always wanted this, but weren't able to voice it, that we just have family everywhere. It took a major super disruptive event for the entire world to make us realize this is what we needed. But, you're right. It's here. I mean, I remember getting emails from Toby Parks, who runs Small Club XBK in Des Moines. and she just gotten started like maybe like 6 or 7 months and then got hit by the pandemic. And she was like, you got to get on these calls, and I was like so busy. We just canceled a festival in Iowa City. We were like getting everything off of our schedule for the spring. And she just kept on emailing, finally called and said, just get on this Zoom. And I got on that Zoom, and I think Moose was leading it. Maybe Dana was there. Maybe Audrey Schaefer was there. And I was like, oh, okay, like, yeah, okay, this makes sense immediately. And it just kind of went from there. And I think, lots of people had that same experience.
Several years later, still running strong, bigger than ever. And the buzz off of Milwaukee last week, it seemed everybody was there. I can tell you that both me and Luke Pierce were having some serious FOMO when we're seeing all the pictures of all our favorite people in one place. Just an amazing group of people, from the First Avenue kids to E-Tix people to the Tixer, just everyone you're talking to, like calling you, talk to you from a cell at outside some party in Milwaukee as they're all moving around from bar to bar and club to club. But the hang was certainly there, and we definitely felt left out. So NIVA bigger than ever, and that's an awesome thing. But more importantly, your day gig. You run a venue in its secondary in Iowa, which is already a small state to begin with, and you're in one of the smaller cities. So challenging thing, but you guys have got a super vibrant business there. So enlighten our listeners on exactly the venue. It's more of a theater.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I've been in Iowa City for 20 years. I'm from DC, but I moved out here to go to the University of Iowa, just a classic like college draw. And I was in school here and then got super involved in the scene, producing a music and literary festival with some of my best friends. And that kind of got me into the business. And, and I was working on the festival. I was working in a small club, about 250 cap. I was working in historic theaters, about 700 cap. And then a couple of years ago, I bumped over to the University of Iowa to take over the PAC that we have here called Hancher Auditorium. And so it was both a totally new experience for me, but I think just having been in the community for a while and just even being in the state of Iowa for a while made that transition, I don't want to say seamless, but like it made it much easier and much more possible, just knowing how things flow in and flow out and flow around the state. Because we're so small here in Iowa, I mean, you really know everyone. Text threads with all of our friends in Davenport and all the stuff that's going over there, whether it's the Raccoon Motel, talking to folks at Codfish or might be booking shows there. Sam Summers in Des Moines has just been like a great friend and ally for so long. Toby Parks in Des Moines as well. Like, it's just like the community is really small. That's what you get from being in a smaller place that's like made up of secondary or tertiary markets. And that's made it possible to do the work that we're doing here. So, I mean, in Iowa City, there's a college town. And I think the thing with the University of Iowa that they've done that is so to our benefit is this school has been so like all in on the arts from like day one or like early days that it's just like built into like the mix of what this school is. The first creative writing class at Iowa was in 1897. Like, I still like can't even like wrap my mind around that. And so you think of like that creative writing scene, you think of the music and the performing arts scene, you think of the visual arts, you got people like Grant Wood hanging around, you got writers like Raymond Carver hanging around, you've got just like all these like arty folks who just like, I think it started to become a feedback loop between the university and the town. And you get to a point where, people just expect cool things to happen here. And it's like part of the culture. And that's like a huge add for being in such a small market. There are about 75,000 people here. And so it's not very big, but I tend to think, it's not without its challenge, but we frequently punch above our weight. I'll get a email from an agent saying, hey, we're doing, 2,000 tickets for the show in Chicago. You guys are only doing 1,000. I'm like, well, that's like only half. And there's like 3 million people there. So like, it's just helping people understand relative to the amount of people here, we tend to really show up in terms of the shows. And that's on the club level. I experienced it on the, the small theater level when I was working at the Englert Theater, and we're getting a lot of positive response here at Hancher at the PAC.
Let's stop and talk about that for a second, because this is something that's always been a issue, is understanding the difference between New York and Des Moines, Chicago and Albuquerque. You can't compare an A market in a hyper A market like Chicago to a secondary in Des Moines. Like, you're trying to play your market on your way to Denver from Chicago. You're not expecting that it's going to be nearly as big. It's like, yeah, you've got New York, you've got Miami, you've got Chicago, you've got Dallas, you've got LA, San Francisco, Seattle, Phoenix. But in between those are the rest of the markets that you need to make a full tour, but they can't all perform at that uber capacity that only exists in those big markets that have populations of that size. It just doesn't exist. So when the agents say something like that to you, is that a little bit of naivety in their own part that they haven't already figured it out? Because most agents that are handling bigger acts know the difference between those markets. But if you're getting into it, having to explain the difference between your market and Chicago, an agent, clearly they missed a step in understanding that all dates can't be valued as the same, because it just doesn't make sense. Otherwise, you guys might have your own sports teams on the pro level, which you don't, because you don't have the population base, right?
100%. I mean, there are a lot of agents who do understand, and you've worked in a lot of markets across the country.
Yeah,
There are
to
a lot
be
of
clear, I'm
agents.
not calling all agents stupid, just very few particular agents that haven't figured out the difference between outcast smaller markets in Iowa and Chicago, Illinois.
So yeah, I think most folks get it. You might have folks who are coming into the business who are maybe younger, maybe newer, maybe have just been coastal their whole lives and don't have as close of a sense of like the Midwest or smaller markets in the South. But no one means it in a bad way. It's just like providing that context, and then people start to figure it out. And a lot of agents I actually think are really sensitive to it. I remember it might sound so small now, but I remember when I was working at the theater level, I think the first big show I did was with Joan Baez, and I think it was with Frank Riley. I remember that team, like Dina and like Frank, like really just like walking me through, like, hey, like, are you feel confident about these prices in your market in Iowa, in Iowa City, in Iowa? And we finally got there, and then of course the show went on sale and like sold out like immediately. I think on the flip side, some agents who have been working this for a while are very sensitive to the nuances of what it means to be in a smaller market, and what it means to be in a smaller market in a packed region with a bunch of small markets, and then these like couple supermarkets like a Chicago or Minneapolis just 4 or 5 hours away. So yeah, I'm always happy to like bring that context and that education with agents. I mean, it's fun. That's like the part of the job. They're like, dude, like, where's Iowa? And like being able to like explain like where we are and like why this may be a cool place for their artist and maybe a great play for their artist. I love that challenge. And when it works, the artists, they come back and the teams come back and say, we want to go back to Iowa City, or we want to go back to Des Moines.
Which is a massive thing, right? It's like, that's what you need. And obviously, Frank's been doing this 40 years now. Like, he knows the difference between the markets. Nobody's accusing Frank Riley and not knowing. But there definitely is, it comes up from time to time, of that education. And I guess that's your job, of explaining the difference between Madison, Wisconsin, and Milwaukee, between Des Moines and Iowa City, right? It's just like between Chicago and Iowa City, when you're in the middle of that routing, and it's like, hey, I wish I was the bigger guarantee of the week, but clearly we can't be always, but hopefully we'll get you to that bonus.
Which we love. And we're lucky, the Midwest is like really connected. There's so many markets here that are within 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours max of each other. And there's enough population base to support shows in all those markets. Some of those markets are kind of big, like Chicago and Minneapolis. Some of them are a little smaller, but still reasonable, like Milwaukee, Kansas City. To be within striking distance of all that, to be on Interstate 80, don't forget that is a gift. Like that makes life like a little bit easier, and I'm stoked for that.
It's a good place to be. So let's talk about the big shows this year that you have coming up that you're excited about, and some of the highlights from last year. And let's talk about your philosophy in the business.
Yeah. So jumping into working at a performing arts center was something that I wasn't immediately going to do. I decided to come to Hancher at the University of Iowa because I liked the team at Iowa. Like, we've got like a great president. Like, she just like really gets that this kind of activity is important to the overall environment of the campus. It's important to the community. It just like is a value add. Like, I've been in conversations with the president or the president's team, and they understand that you want to have Hawkeyes football and like good shows coming through, like not one or the other. You want to have like, the women's basketball team doing their thing and awesome shows happening. So like that was the draw. And I also, you might have a view on it too, but like I feel like performing arts centers, university presenters are like in this moment where there might have been an older model in the 80s or the 90s that was really successful, really robust. And maybe in some places it's like super robust. But I think most of us are in a moment where we have to figure out how do we serve multiple audiences, which might not have been a question of these places before. Some folks are doing like a classic performing arts season. Some folks are like super Broadway focused, but I think people more and more are trying to figure out, well, how do we have a commercial draw? How do we like become a place where touring artists are going to be able to come through if they're musicians, touring comics are going to be able to come through, and to know that this is a place that understands what those tours are trying to do and is welcoming to those tours, and that the marketing teams, the engagement teams are actually like working to build audience for those kinds of tours. For us, it's not like there's a million venues around here. So we've got nearly 1,800 seats, which in some places is nothing, but that's like something in Iowa City. And if we're not addressing the market, like and to some degree, we're not doing our job, right? Like, we have to think about both the person who wants like a symphony orchestra coming through, the person who wants to see like the Broadway titles come through, but also like the people who want to see Jason Isbell play, and how do you balance all those together to make it work? I feel like so many people have been caught up in the idea of like a really static season and being like, hey, we're going to release the season and here's what it is in performing arts world, which is cool. And like, I definitely understand why that was the thing 20 years ago or 25 years ago. But in order for us to stay on top of opportunities, we got to just be open. When Jason Isbell says we're going to do this tour, we got to say, great, we've got those holds, we got those avails. Let's go forward and make it happen. If the season's already been announced, that's cool. That's great to like be adding stuff in. The community responds really well to that. Comedy, as you know, sometimes doesn't book very far out. Maybe it's getting the band is getting a little bit longer now post pandemic than it used to be, but like we just got to be able to be responsive. So I think when I consider my philosophy, talk about our team's philosophy, it's like flexibility to all the different kinds of audience members who are out there. Some of which are people who've been living in this area. Some people are traveling in from more rural areas around us. We've got 30,000 students on campus. This is like the largest employer being at the university. That's a lot of people we need to serve, staff, faculty. All those people have different interests. And so like, we just have to be flexible. We got to have like a range of things that we're doing. So I think we're not alone in this, but we're trying to think about how do we redefine the vibrancy of like a performing arts center.
It's an interesting thing that you talk about the campus town and how that affects you, right? Because obviously when summer school's in and you lose 80% of your student population, that's obviously going to affect a big thing and part of your sale base. Not only are you losing the kids, but when I started booking shows in Eugene, was not only were we losing the kids, but when we were doing the heavier, artsier stuff, we're losing the professors and the admin that were buying my tickets to Chick Corea, right? So it was like, not only am I worried about selling tickets to my Sum 41 concert in the middle of the summer, but now I've got a problem because the people that taught them are gone too, because that's when they're going to Europe for the summer. The perfect show always seemed to line up perfectly in summer, right? Like every great avail, right? It was like constantly that phone call of like Frank had the Indigo Girls coming through in the middle of summer, right? When you're just like, oh, it's Eugene. October would be so much bigger for them here. But of course, we're going to make the July date work because that's what you have for me and we're not missing that show. And that becomes the game. But if you can figure out how to promote and make that show work and get them through the market and not lose in that small market, when you grow into the bigger markets, you become a much better buyer. Whereas Des Moines will be easier to sell later. Milwaukee will be easier to sell. If you can make money in Iowa City with those acts, even though you'll have to pay them more in those other markets, the tricks that you'll learn to promote to that much smaller base will carry through when you move into those bigger markets. And there's something about buying shows at a college town level that made me such a better buyer than the buyers I was competing with in Seattle and Portland, Not to say that I'm a better buyer than all of them, but I had to learn better tricks because I had a smaller share to base from, just in the same way that minor league baseball has to be more creative about how they're marketing because they don't have the superstars to fill those parks in those smaller markets. So not only is it cheaper tickets, but it's these very creative processes on how to reach people and get them in for these games because you have no idea who you're coming to see the game. You might as well go sit in the stands for free at a high school ball game for all it's doing you because you have no idea who's playing, right? It's just the
Right.
sport itself at that point. So how do you make that more exciting than just watching, a little league game? And that's what you learn in those small college markets is how to harness every trick you possibly can. So when you do get called up, and not to say that a bigger market is a better job than a smaller market, but you certainly learn how to promote much better. And odds are when you move into that bigger market, you're going to get a bigger salary because cost of living and volume are all higher there. So if you take all those tricks from that college market that you learned, odds are you're going to sell more tickets in a different way than your predecessor because you had to. You had to know how to do that better. And that stuff does carry over. It's amazing some of the things that we learned in some of those small college markets on how to sell tickets in Albuquerque and Fort Collins and Cheyenne carry over when you're putting a show on sale in Denver that didn't sell as well as you were hoping. And you go to those creative files and you're like, oh, what did we do to fill the room again in Cheyenne? All right, well, let's try that here. It's got to be universal and usually turns out to be. So I think your toolbox is probably not only as filled with some creative tools that you've picked up there, but probably a lot more full because you've had to rely on that more and had to develop those skills.
Yeah, I love the college town ebb and flow. Like it's hot when it comes in mid to late August. Football's going to start up, energy's strong, quiets down again as you like get to the holiday season. But then people come back. People are always coming back strong with like the start of a new season, whether it's fall, winter, or the end of the spring going into the summer. We do think about the ebb and flow. Another thing is that because we're in a smaller town, we're in a smaller state, we're thinking about like what is like the overall calendar of Iowa, or at least like central to eastern Iowa. I watch what Sam Summers is up to over in Des Moines because he'll do something like Hinterland, that festival, it's in August, and that sets like a marker that's going to attract a bunch of the state. So like anything else we do is going to be kind of reacting to that to make sure it's complementary and not like demanding too much of fans. Because like a lot of the people who live here are going to go there. So that's the big buy for them this summer. That's their big ticket. That's the big trip that they're doing. That's an in-state fun trip to catch up with old friends.
I would assume Lollapalooza is the same way because they're close enough that you can drive to that.
Yeah, Lala used to be a huge pool. I don't know the data. I only know like the qualitative information on this, which I think, and kudos to the First Fleet team. I think they've built Hinterland to like a real destination for Iowans. Generally, it makes it an easier trip. It's a little bit more pastoral than going into the city for a festival, and so I think that's interesting. And I think they're starting to draw people from regionally and beyond the region because some of these other festivals have gotten so big, which I think is awesome when you're 20 and like 25. You love to be in that madness. Some of us get older and like want something that at least feels a little bit more peaceful sometimes, to be able to go to, but also to see like bands that are relevant, bands that are classic, and everything that's in between, bands that are emerging. And so they've done an amazing job. But them doing their schedule helps us with our schedule. What's going on in Codfish Hollow helps us understand where the needs are in the market here going into the summer, coming out of the summer. I generally think that all the promoters, all the venue operators have done a really good job in Iowa of being in touch. I don't think there's any promoter, any festival runner, any club owner that I would feel nervous reaching out to. Folks are cordial. That sounds like so Midwestern, but it's like, I think that's just like the general vibe that makes it a lot easier to kind of figure out what to do, when to do it. And also, my personal philosophy is like, if we're not the right venue for a show, if we don't have the avails, I want that show to either be somewhere else in the market or to be somewhere else in the state. Because
rising tides rises all ships, right?
100%. If they play Des Moines this time, that's a win for Iowa. They're going to want to go back to Des Moines at some point, but they might want to diversify and go to Davenport, come to Iowa City the next time. If they play all three of those markets and have great shows over like a 3 or 4 year period, we all look better, And so There's been so much investment on the small club level here on restoring and preserving theaters that, were built 100 years ago. We're grateful and lucky enough to have this beautiful facility on a university campus. So we've got the venues. And so I think we just need to be just playing nicely with each other and everyone's going to win.
Well, and I think trying to book in between your Broadway series has got to be a challenge too, right? Because you've got a vibrant Broadway series bringing arts to that market.
Yeah, Broadway's funny to me because myself and my teammate Aaron Greenwald, who works on the programming team, neither of us had ever done Broadway before, and so we're going into our third season of doing Broadway series. The whole Broadway booking world has been super open to us, and so we're grateful for that. Iowa has its best Broadway series in Des Moines at Des Moines Performing Arts. Jeff Chelsvig and his team have been investing in that for 10 or 15 years. They've built it into an absolute beast. Jeff is one of the voters for the Tonys every year. So he's really representing. And so when we came into the Broadway market, we literally from day one said, we do not need to be number one. And there's no way that we're going to even try to go head to head with Jeff. At that time, I don't think there were a lot of series at PACs or theaters who were trying to even be number two. So it was there's already Coke, maybe we can be Dr. Pepper. And everyone likes Dr. Pepper. So we built it with that philosophy. So we're, instead of doing full week sit downs, we're doing 4-day weekend plays. So we do a Friday, Saturday matinees, Saturday night, and then we do a Sunday matinee, and then that crew gets out of here and they're on the road. I think for the touring companies, they feel like that's sitting down enough and they're getting enough audience, enough revenue, enough savings from having sat down in a place, being in a really, what we think is a really fantastic venue, that it's a win for them. And we're not getting ahead of our skis on our side. I think if we try to do full week sit downs, that would have been, maybe we could have made the nut, but I think we would have been dealing with audiences and houses that weren't totally full or close to full. And just, we want things to feel full. We talk about that all the time. Just if it's not going to feel full, we don't want that experience for the artist. We don't want that experience for the audience. So we've been able to do that. And it means we have less leverage in terms of getting immediate shows that Des Moines gets, but that's fine. When we started this series, I called Jeff and Jeff was just totally supportive. I think it's the thing again, there wasn't someone else doing a fully committed series like this in Iowa, at least in this side of the state. There is some stuff probably up in Northwest Iowa. We just went for it. And I think the audience is super into it because now they can go see those first runs in Des Moines. We might get one or two first runs, in a season. And if they miss it in Des Moines, they know they're going to catch it here the next year.
And you guys are 114 miles apart. So it's not like people are going back and forth for every show. Broadway's a little different. You really probably don't want a week of something playing both markets, but right. Obviously your Broadway season is probably going to appeal to people that live within 30 miles of Iowa City, give or take. They're probably pulling from their broad base of a radius of 30 to 45 miles, and probably don't overlap a ton unless you get a hardcore fan that, it's you guys have Rent coming up. So you guys will probably pull from the state because that's one of those shows that, people will drive for. But in the most part, you're probably not going to see a ton of people driving in for Music Man. So it tends to flex a little differently.
Yeah. And because we're doing those 4 shows, you'll see the other side of the split go to Davenport. Maybe Nederlander will pick that up and do it at the Adler or whatever theater they want to work in. Might see another one go to Cedar Falls or the University of Northern Iowa is. So it ends up, putting those shows in the state. So you're going to see it one way or another.
Okay. And Davenport's a little closer, right? So you guys are giving up 60 miles there. And that if you guys are splitting a week with those guys, that tends to be a little closer. So you probably have to be a little more careful on that.
We do the thing that I think a lot of promoters do. You put the radius in, you get the call from the agent, hey, I need this to happen. In order for this whole tour to happen. When we get that call and it's sincere, yeah, we're always going to play ball. We love that people are going to see that in Davenport. We love some people from Davenport to come see our venue, but it's not going to be on every show. And that's cool.
It's more those people in the middle that would have gone to your venue that maybe are going to be members that, makes it a little tougher. But you guys have got some great stuff playing in your room this year. I'm on your website. You guys got a Goose date that's announced, which is probably one of the smaller venues they're going to be playing this year at this point. I mean, they're doing Madison Square Gardens and two nights at Fiddler's Green at this point, but they're stopping. That's a get, right. Ray LaMontagne's a cool show. Ben Folds is a super cool show. You guys are already sold out with Stereo Lab. Good things going on.
Yeah, we feel super happy. We've agents really think about us more than maybe sometimes they need to for a town that's only 75,000 people. But I think we're just trying to maintain that reputation, take care of artists, do awesome shows, have audiences that are stoked. I think one thing that's great for us is that we have a lot of mixed audiences in terms of like that generational mix. Like there are old people, there are people like more my age, and then there are very young people. And I think the audiences love that. Like someone 70 sees someone who's like 25. It's good energy. The artists react to that. So yeah, we're gonna do what we can do. And I think, Goose coming here, they were really explicit that they wanted to engage with the college market. They know that there's going to be a lot of people who are, middle-aged like me and up who are going to be at that show, but they know that there's also going to be a bunch of students here. And that was, I think, a big driver for them is to like think about how do we serve our existing audience? How do we make sure that we're bringing people in?
That's them investing in their future by playing a big college market early on.
It's smart, right? Like that's just one date on that tour. I mean, if they just give every 10th date is like, we're going to invest, that's going to pay off for them in the future. And,
that's how you become Dave Matthews in the long run. Yeah.
And
well, it's certainly a step towards it.
You're from Oregon, I'm probably a separate podcast would be to talk about the Big Ten. So I'll let that lie for today. But you're now in the Big Ten. There's probably with grad students and undergrads, there's about like 30,000 people at Oregon. Like there's about 30,000 people at Iowa. You look at the whole Big Ten. There's just under like 1 million college students. The bulk of those undergrad, and then maybe 2/3 undergrad, 1/3 grad students. These schools are like amazing opportunities for all of us to be building the next generation, and we're all going to need it. Artists are going to need it. Promoters are going to need it. Presenters are going to need it. Like we have to invest. These like this is where we begin to like show what experience might be. I love being here because we get to do a Goose show and then like a Ben Folds show, then a Stereo Lab show, and then like Trisha Brown Dance Company. So we're just going to throw a lot of things to that college audience. And like maybe you get a student who sees a Broadway thing, sees a cool rock show, and then sees a dance performance. And if that happens in 1 year with a student, I'm like, we're doing our job, and that's like on top of just driving the regular audience who's used to buying tickets, who's out of college. And this is just part of their routine.
We've spent some time together at Aspen Live Socially, which probably can't say enough good things about a conference like that and how that brings people like you and me together in a social format. But you've done a great job of networking and getting out there and putting yourself in front of a lot of those agents. So things like Stereo Lab play your room and are sold out way in advance, which honestly, I was a little surprised that an October show was sold out with Stereo Lab in your market this far out. When that book, did you see that happening? Selling out, not shocked, but selling out this far in advance, like it's kind of massive.
I'm like always worried, like I never have confidence until it's like sold out. I think that tour is doing really well. Yeah. I mean, you look at all the dates they're doing, they're crushing everywhere. People wanted that unique, amazing sound that is Stereo Lab. It like they're not like a lot of other bands like Stereo Lab, and they're not in the US all the time. They don't tour all the time. We're constantly looking for like, how can we have a unique experience? And I think they're delivering that, So yeah, it's doing well. I didn't have the full confidence, I love that show, and there was like no way we weren't going to do the Stereo Lab show, but I'm always so stressed about, are people going to show up? Are people going to get it? Are we going to get both like the old heads? Are we going to get the young heads to come in? But people showed up, and I can't remember the exact number, but our student tickets were through the roof on that Stereo Lab show. That probably surprised me more than the old people like me showing up to, buy our tickets for Stereo Lab, is that they have now had enough history and enough influence that you're in college and you're like, I want to go see that. So that not only surprised me, that made me happy. That tells me there might be hope for the future.
All of this is amazing. Next level philosophy, next level building in the future of our market when you see bands of that ilk selling out in tertiaries so many years after like their original run. It's such a cool thing, right? I mean, you expect it in New York and San Francisco, but like Iowa City, Stereolab, who the fuck knew? I'm gonna get some emails from agents because it's like I'm talking down about the band, but and I'm not. They're amazing, and I love them, and I
They're the
think
best.
it's
Great
like
band.
they're right up there with Sonic Youth for me. It's just like all time cool shit. It's best of the '90s. So please don't email me. Just it's more about the market than anything else. If anybody, Andre should be yelling at me, not the agent. It's just like what a market. It's amazing. But the shows you're getting in the market, what you guys have been able to build there is impressive. What you've done with NIVA is nothing short of a miracle. Getting that not only to come together, but everybody to have the joy and love for each other. It's impressive because usually these guys are at each other's throats competing, and they've put that to the side for the moment and are all coming together. And it's kind of neat to see because as long as I've been at Live Nation, I've always still been an indie at heart.
At the end of the day, it's like people, right? It's us just sharing stories, sharing experience. There are a million things I could ask you, and I know I could hit you up and you'd be like, hey man, like here's how you do this thing. And like at the end, it's just the people just trying to get together, trying to figure out how to be here. There might be larger structural things that we agree on or don't agree on, or just need to be more globally educated on, just to understand where everyone's coming from. But we're not going to make any progress if we're not all in rooms together, like that's where things are going to move forward. You were talking about Aspen Live. I've been lucky to be able to go the last couple of years, and that being in that room is just like totally blown my mind. I love just like shutting up, going to the back of the room and just hearing knowledge dropped, and then trying to ask, a speaker a million questions after they've been up there and they're hanging out later in the night. That's where we all learn in those kinds of situations. I think a thing like Aspen Live, I think a thing like NIVA, I think even like a thing like Polestar, anytime that we're not immediately having to answer an email or a phone call or dealing with a report or getting something up or making sure that something went up or dealing with a problem, making sure that an ACH has gone out, we let our guard down a little bit. And I think we become a little bit more human, even though we're in a professional context. Just being around other people who care, it does a lot for us. I can't measure that, but I know that people left NIVA. I know that people left Aspen Live. I know that people left Polestar this spring and just felt better about what we all do. And so, yes, like we should all get together. We should all talk. If we want to have a couple like hot arguments or hot takes, let's do that. And then let's hang out afterwards and have dinner or lunch or whatever it is, which is my long pitch to say, Dan, that, I expect to see you guys in Minneapolis.
Well, invite Promoter 101 to come do something, and me and Luke will do that. I will commit to that here and now. That if you guys invite us to be on the dais, we will show up and we will be happy to be there.
I will send a long email to Jamie Loeb.
I don't know that we know her, but yeah, please do introduce us. And I think she's with those Niederlander people that do Broadway, right? And own the Yankees.
Yeah.
I've heard good things.
She is the best. Another person you can just pick up the phone and she'll just tell you how it is, and you'll be smarter and you will be able to do your job better.
Yeah, Jamie's got some tricks up her sleeve of her own. There was one of those little bighorn tricks that I always thought was great, that she would do the Groupon and Gold Stars and get people to see the cheap tickets because they have those eyeballs. And then they realized they didn't know the show was coming, so they found those eyeballs, but they didn't want the seats that they were discounting at the back of the house. They wanted the good seats, so they go on the primary, and then they buy the good ticket at full price up front. You're moving tickets, you're just getting those eyeballs, and Jamie taught me that. Always a fan of Jamie's little tricks. She's got a million of them, and she's really, really good at it, which is probably why she's kept her job for so long.
She is amazing. Speaking of secondary markets, this is the craziest secondary market story I've heard in a while. I was at NIVA just hanging out, and my operations director sends me a line. So our Goose Show is free. That is a full-on just party that we're throwing at the top of the year, and we're actually doing it outside. So our cap is like way larger than our regular cap. It's like a few thousand, 4,000 people. A big event for us. There are resale tickets for that free show on the secondaries right now. which is just like insane. We'll deal with it. I mean, at the end of the day, we just want to make sure that, no one's getting hurt and no one has a bad experience out of what should have been a transformative experience for them. So we'll deal with it. But like, I saw that and I almost had to like pass out. I was like, we're losing the plot here. We got to come back to reality.
And the scraping of the web for the free tickets. That's a new one. We're canceling your comps. That's a new one. I do like the hypocrisy in the canceling of the tickets for the scalpers on the shows that are selling great versus the shows that aren't selling great. It's amazing to me that the same acts that used to scrape the web and cancel tickets don't have that same request when their tours aren't selling as well.
It is wild. I've been watching Josh Johnson, the comedian. Like his team has been doing a really active role in trying to clean out all their shows because he's just been selling out, all these houses in the major market. I think he just did 10 shows or sold out 10 shows in Boston, and they have to like clean out all the fake tickets in order to make room for like there's like actually truly people who still want to buy like a real ticket, and they like almost have a squad that is just like looking at that day to day to make sure that every ticket sold to his show is a real human who wants to see that show.
It's nice the technology has increased in that world that they can play that game digitally and clean that stuff up, where Garth Brooks used to beat the scalpers in the arena by continuing to add shows.
Yeah.
To make sure that anyone that wanted to buy a ticket at face value could. He'd keep rolling shows and he'd do these record number of arena shows in the same arena and would just keep rolling, which was amazing, right? So it's just like, but if he wanted to keep, what I'm guessing was $39.50 back in the early 90s and late 80s when he was doing that, is, it was equivalent to what, $79.50 today or something. But wanted a reasonable price ticket for his fans. So even those scalpers, you couldn't stop the scalpers from buying up the tickets because they were hard tickets.
Yeah.
He did figure out that system, and he just kept adding shows. And God bless him, right? But, this is better technology that they've figured out. And although the scalpers find better technology with the bots and, it is an active game because just when you have all the answers, they change all the questions.
Yeah. We're just waiting for Skynet. They'll figure it out.
The future is Skynet. That's another podcast. Andre, I can't thank you enough for taking time and talking to us. Congratulations on an amazing run as president and an amazing NIVA conference in Milwaukee and an incredible run with the theater. I know we only have bigger and better things coming from you in the years to come in our business, and I thank you for the time and joining us on Promoter 101.
Thanks so much. It's awesome to be here.
It's pretty obvious they never really grew up. They only learned how to act in public. Steiny and Luke in the morning on Promoter 101.
In a special global look, Luke's going to share what he did on his summer vacation and report back on the business and goings-on in mainland China.
Luke, why don't you tell us about your trip with Home Free to Asia? Because that sounded to me like the trip of a lifetime, particularly if you didn't have to work, but it sounded like they put you to work.
They did put me to work. More specifically, it was actually mainland China, which was the first time that I've done a tour of mainland China. I think we've had some private events in China previously on our roster, kind of bombing in, bombing out of Beijing or Shanghai in the past. But this was a 5-show, 4-city tour through all over mainland China. And it was quite the experience, Dan. I got to say, I went over there pulling some double duty, both managing and tour managing because of some visa issues related to some travel. But the double time, I certainly think, taught me a little bit about touring in China, which feels ripe with opportunity over there. We've been working in China on the record side of things for 5 or 6 years now, and it's one of the fastest markets for growth in recorded music. But the opportunity that I saw just being amongst Chinese people in Beijing and Shanghai and Shenyang and Dalian and Chongqing, which is the cities that we spent most of our time in during this trip, feels like China's move towards consumerism is definitely putting more money into things like live entertainment. It's shocking to me, some of these cities, which, I had never heard of prior to engaging our promoter over in China. Some of these places, Dan, Chongqing, provincial province of Jilin, it's like 8 million people over there. pretty much every city we went to I'd never heard of and had more than any city in the United States, with the exception of New York and Chicago and Los Angeles. And just so the density of people, if you just scratch the surface and capture 0.5% of people, you're going to get, 15,000 people to show up like they did for a Friday After 5 event that we did in Chongqing with Home Free. I mean, the business is rather nuts. One of the things that I found super interesting about China is this idea of digital sovereignty. I'm sure probably heard a little bit about this or seen, there was a recent Wall Street Journal article about digital sovereignty in Russia. In essence, what these countries have done is they've created these mega apps. Like there are two in China. It's WeChat and Alipay. These are the place where it's a social media app. It's a place where people basically SMS. It's where you send documents. You can do voice to text. You can do audio messages. You can do phone calls all on WeChat. You do all your payments. I never once brought my wallet anywhere. I leave the passport in the wallet in the safe in the hotel. Go out my day and would take my phone everywhere and pay for everything using WeChat or its competitor Alipay. They're both owned by a company called Tencent, which is large holdings company that has interest in music, but these social media mega apps have inside them mini programs, which are essentially, everything you want from buying. We bought tickets to go see a movie over there. We were using it for Didi, which is their Uber. We used it for, delivering food to places. It was pretty incredible.
Apple Pay meets Uber meets Uber Eats all in one.
Yeah, totally. And they build these apps, in partnership with private companies. It's partly owned or partly controlled by the Chinese government and partly owned by Tencent. And of course, it's the guise of all of it is that they're not tied or beholden to multinational tech companies. In terms of the sphere of influence these companies like Facebook, Google, or Apple might have into the everyday lives of countries in which they operate. It's not to say that, some of those companies aren't in existence in China, but it's also just a giant tool for mass surveillance too. So you just know you're being watched pretty much everywhere you go, from the number of CCTVs you can see in every corner, to the app that you're experiencing in everyday life. And what I found so interesting about it is how sticky and how much time people spend inside these apps. I mean, it's like all day, every day, you're inside WeChat. It's unlike anything that I see over here. The closest thing I can think of is maybe having your Apple phone and being on an iMessage and using apps all day. But literally, you could open up your Huawei phone in China and be on one app all day, talk to all your friends, catch a glimpse of social media inside of WeChat, pay for everything, order cars, order food, order whatever you want. And so those apps were mind blowing to me. I just think the opportunity it has to kind of game the social media system over there as well too, by adding people on WeChat was pretty incredible as well too. The business itself
seems like the early days of The Office when Ryan Howard figured out Woof, where it was one thing that could hit all of the different ways to find somebody simultaneously. It seems like the Chinese government has done this on steroids
to a pretty incredible degree. Truly, Russia's building a similar app to this. I think there's some, totalitarian-leaning Eastern European countries that are pursuing the same ends as well too. And I'll say this: they were convenient at the very least. The business over there was interesting to navigate for sure. We had a promoter who mostly specialized in kind of performing arts centers, which is akin to symphony halls over here. Live houses are like clubs, rock opera houses are like theaters, and then you have stadiums. They all have a degree of cultural authority that approves pretty much everything that goes on stage, from lyrics and song to what you say to subtitles displayed on, your iMags on either side of the stage. And with that comes, the degree of coordination and the creative that I think artists may not be used to, but it's just something that any sort of imported content is going to be subject to over in China. And so navigating that bit of things was at times challenging for sure.
And if you fuck that up and change the plan in front of the audience after the government approves something, you're out, right? That's one strike kind of shit.
It's, everyone was very worried about that for sure. The worst thing that's going to be happen is if you say something controversial, you'll probably be invited to leave the country pretty quickly. And it's not like there's going to be somebody there just angry at you. But what does happen is it burns your promoter relationships pretty quickly. There's local promoters in every market, and they register the shows and register their interests with whatever branch of the Ministry of Cultural Authority that's over there. And so when they go to register the shows, it's their responsibility to kind of stamp and guarantee what's on stage.
So not only are they financially invested in the show, they're also like putting their livelihood on the line for what you guys say on stage.
Yeah.
Whole different level of risk.
And certainly it inside of China was pretty interesting too. I mean, like the closer you are in proximity to places like Beijing, which is like, Beijing is inside of a province, but its government is more like the best equivalent I can think of is like Washington, D.C., right? District of Columbia, where it's like a federally administrated state. So there are 3 or 4 cities like that in China. And when you're inside those federally administrated states, the rules are different than like going to Shanghai or Dalian or anywhere like that. So like the closer in proximity you find yourself to those types of governments, the greater the degree of scrutiny. So you could experience one thing in one city, where it kind of slides by and they don't say much, and then you get to Beijing and there's a whole different set of rules. And so, I definitely stepped in some shit in Beijing, not knowing exactly what those rules were in coordination with our promoter in terms of like where we wanted to make changes and how to really expect when those approvals came in. I mean, this is stuff we submitted like 3 months in advance, and like 2 hours prior to the show, we were like, don't sing that half that song. It's got some words that we're uncomfortable with. And so, it presented some technical challenges, but I will say, like, for all that, we had a very gracious promoter who did her best to kind of help bridge the gap between the way that we do business in the States and pretty much everywhere else in the world, and what is it like in China. And so the idea, behind all this is, I understand the place that it sort of comes from, and I now understand why tech companies and sales companies have US sales team and their Europe sales team, and they'll have an Asian sales team, but then they'll have a Chinese specific sales team. So like it's a very specific way of doing business over there that takes a lot of adaptation. But if you're like willing to go through the headache, the opportunity is, I think, really incredible. So for those of you that have any interest in sending people to China or partnering with people in China, I'd be happy to sit down with you and give you the best and the worst of it. But I was lucky to go over there and eat some great food I was over there for like 12 days. After like the 9th day, I sort of got sick of eating like traditional Chinese food and found my first burger in Shanghai at a French bistro. Shanghai, by the way, world-class city. I'd never been. I'd been to Beijing twice for work previously and another life in finance, but never had done music over there. Shanghai, we stayed in like a pretty much a brand new Hilton for like 35 US a night right off the Bund, which is like the river area where all like the magnificent kind of skylines are. We ate Michelin star meals over there pretty much 3 nights in a row. I think like one meal that I picked up for like 8 people with drinks was like $230. So I mean, I feel like you could go to Shanghai, flying like premium economy and spend a week there and eat only Michelin star meals and see shows for like less than 4 nights in New York. It was pretty incredible. I would like definitely recommend anyone looking to experience China. There's a lot we went to the Ming Dynasty Palace in Shenyang and saw some of that. We unfortunately didn't get to the Forbidden City on this trip in Beijing, but just like the experience of Shanghai felt like one of the best metro experiences that I've had in a foreign country. And there's like 35 million people or something like that in Shanghai, and massive place. Really enjoyed myself. Have some great recommendations for Shanghai if you ever do want to go over there and do that. And also did a bunch of knockoff shopping, which is a lot of fun. Got some bags, got some Folexes. It's pretty incredible. I was texting with I was in a market in Shanghai, found a golf store. Was texting with a friend who owns a golf brand. It's a pretty famous like streetwear golf brand, and sending him pictures of like the stitching on the knockoffs. And he's like, "That looks exactly like our shit." It was like 15 cents on the dollar for buying his stuff over there. So picked up some good stuff and kept some relationships over there too. You basically go over there and add people on WeChat and can stay in touch with them. So like if you need a leather good or an electronic, or we're looking at like buying some gear from China for some of our clients now. We've got them all over there. So it's certainly worth it. I will say this, like the one surprising thing, the Wagyu burger at KFC. That fucking saved me. Like after like a couple days of just like not feeling like I want to have like another spicy Chinese meal. Like my first bit of American food was, I was asking somebody about, I'd had this burger at a French restaurant called Char Char Bistro in Shanghai, and it was really great. And then I got a taste of, it was like my first taste of beef pretty much that wasn't in some sort of hot Sichuan sauce in about 9 days. And so I kind of wrote out the remainder of my trip eating, with the exception of some Peking duck in Beijing, pretty much American food. And the fucking Wagyu burger at KFC it blew my mind. I didn't try any of the chicken there at all, but the Wagyu burger at KFC was mind-blowingly good.
So an interesting point about the KFC, when I was in Italy over Christmas, there was a line around the block for KFC, and I've started to notice with my international travels how big of a deal KFC is internationally. As you know, it's like it's a great comfort food meal for everybody here, as we've always known. But like, you don't really think of some of these places as huge international things, but KFC is a massive chain globally, and everywhere I went on this trip, they were there. And some of the brands aren't everywhere, but they are. Actually, I think Wendy's was getting their first Reykjavik location as we were leaving. That was a big deal in the press, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, the KFC Yum Brands. I remember like in the CEO of Yum Brands came to Penn State and spoke in like 2008, and they talked about their expansion into China and how they were the fastest growing fast food brand over there, and they are everywhere over there. Not
Which is
something
great
I
because it also brings Pepsi Cola with them as they open those up, because Pepsi is Yumco, and also Taco Bell and Pizza Hut is in that now. It's just like all those Yum brands, it's all part of Pepsi. They couldn't break a lot of those locations. Coke had them, so they started buying the food chains and then putting themselves in, and they created this division, which is a profitable division.
Yeah, I mean, Yum Brand's certainly a huge player just up the road in Louisville, Kentucky. Yeah, they're a several billion-dollar market cap company with tons of locations for sure.
How hard was it to get around not speaking the language? Because clearly you're an English-speaking American.
Yeah, totally. It really came down city to city, right? Shanghai, English is everywhere. Beijing, it's pretty good English. Depends on we were like basically like 45 minutes east of the city center in Beijing and the Tongzhou district. You know, the closer you get to the city center in Beijing, the more English there is. You know, it was probably like half and half by the time you make it 45 minutes outside of that. Beijing is much like LA, where it's just like sprawling. You can go 4 hours in either direction and stay in Beijing through traffic. You know, but you get to places like Shenyang where it's, you know, there's a lot of cultural importance. There's a lot of manufacturing, sort of blue collar sort of feel like it. You know, I was using Google Translator. Like, luckily, we had Ethan, who was part of the promotion team that we were with, was a younger guy and basically came with us everywhere to all of the things. He would come with us to meals. He'd come with us to the markets. He came with us to the, you know, the cultural experiences sort of thing. So he was like pretty good about translating stuff for us. But Google Translate like works pretty amazingly. You know, not just the speaking part was probably not the most challenging bit of things, because you can literally press the conversational thing with AI and you can have a conversation with the phone in between two people and it'll translate, you know, close to real time.
Nice.
But like just you know, there were very very few times where like there were solely American, you know, alphabets and characters. And so like I was a little overwhelmed by just like, you know, there's sometimes an English translation of things, but a lot of times not. So like I went on the metro in Shanghai a couple times, and like there were some stops that had some English and some English instructions. Sometimes I'd be like, fuck, I need like a minute here, and I'd have to take a picture and then run it through ChatGPT or run it through Google Translate to do that. So like I definitely missed a train, like waiting to be, you know, trying to figure out which train I was supposed to be on by taking some pictures of stuff. So you got to give yourselves a little bit more time, you know, just in going that. But it wasn't as overwhelming, you know, luckily, because we had our promoter who spoke pretty good English and all those apps that are incredible in it. So
Love all of that for you, and certainly want to get over and check out Asia in the future for sure.
yeah, good time.
They intend to live forever. So far, so good. Steiny and Luke in the morning on Promoter 101.
This week's quote of the month: music is one of the toughest industries. So I respect anybody who has traveled any distance, come far in the music business, and achieved anything, because it's so hard. And there are so many people out there these days. G-Eazy credited with that quote, Luke. G-Eazy. Sometimes the gems come to us from unexpected places.
This must have been an early quote from G-Eazy. I feel like he's gotten some mixed stuff as of recently, both in some tabloid drama and his criticisms of industry plant stuff. So
I should point out, he didn't say it to me. This is just a G-Eazy quote that I pulled from the internet. We weren't like kicking it.
Well, a guy certainly has leveraged some branding and partnership stuff pretty effectively. He knows what he's doing. He's not wrong in what he's saying. I should, you know, pay attention to the message and not the messenger.
Little respect for the G-Eazy's.
Giving G-Eazy some respect.
Hat off to G-Eazy.
Proof that you can be half asleep and still mildly entertaining. It's Steiny and Luke in the morning on Promoter 101.
Enough of this chitter chatter, boys. It's time to let the people off the hook.
All right, Connor. No problem here. Friends, thank you for joining us for this episode of Promoter 101. Grateful for all of our listeners. We'd love to hear from you. Shoot us a note. It's steiny@promoter101.net. If you miss us, if you want to catch up, we want to hear what you think about the podcast, what we should be doing next. Stay in touch, would you?
And thank you all for listening. We'll talk again on September 26th and the last Thursday of every month moving forward.
Our September episode will feature independent artist group's head of global music, Jared Arfa.
Excited about that upcoming episode. But in the meantime, we're wishing you sold-out shows for the month to come.
Cheers!
You sold-out shows for the month to come.
Cheers!
Visit the buffet called Promoter 101.